Hey, I'm Laura Smith for PG Up Close, and today I'm here with Jack Grinhaus, Artistic Director of Theatre Northwest. How are you doing today?
I'm well, Laura. How are you?
I'm good. So I wanted to start off by just talking about Theatre Northwest more generally and how you first got involved in it.
Well, Theatre Northwest is in its 24th season. It is a professional regional theatre. There are about 36 of those in Canada, so to have one in Prince George is a very exciting thing because we bring the best of all the talent available in Canada to work here in professional productions. They're paid through the unions and systems like that, and the shows are all modern, contemporary works that have a broad range to them, from comedy to drama to a little bit of music and sometimes a little bit of mystery, but all the time being entertaining and speaking to concerns of northern BC residents.
Yeah, and how do you go about picking those shows? Is there some theming for each season, or?
I like to choose a theme myself. I have a long background in history and theater. I started when I was about 8 or 9 years old, so I was quite young when I began theater. But yeah, it's an exciting process. You read a lot of plays. A lot of people submit plays. Theatre Northwest has an incredible focus on Canadian work, so 50% of all the work we do is always Canadian. So that's exciting because considering Canadian history or westernized English Canadian history in theatre is not that long, we've actually come a long way. You get 1,000 or 2,000 years in Italy or England, and we've only got 50 or 60 years of English writing that's sort of natural to the westernized style. So it's a long process. Sometimes recommendations, sometimes I call other artistic directors, but most of the time I try to pick a theme that the whole season can kind of come together with. A patron once said to me, I like coming to your seasons because it's like reading chapters in a book. And so each play has a way of sort of telling the whole season's story individually. And so you can enjoy one or you can come and enjoy the whole season.
Yeah, and do you find that your themes and stuff relate differently here in northern BC? I know you did spend some time in Toronto or grew up in Toronto, so it's a very different environment up here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it always takes a little bit of time when you're getting into a community and learning a new community, what it is they like, what are they interested in, and at the same time trying to continue the conversation of art with them, because art is always changing, it's always growing, it can never be the same thing all the time. So that conversation is constant where the audience says, well, we want this, and you say, yes, I'd love to give you that, but we either already did that or that's not as important as this here, which is like this but even better, right? And it's a bit about, you can't always get what you want, sometimes you get what you need, but I try hard to balance the season in a way whereby there's something for everyone and what I say, more for most. And so that's how I usually choose, is trying to find a way to make sure that the whole city is being thought of when we do that, because there are a lot of different diverse community members in this city that come from different backgrounds, different ages, and so to be able to provide something that's perfect for everyone is never going to happen. So you just try to make sure there's always something in there for everyone.
And more generally, what do you think the importance of having arts and having this availability for a smaller community is?
I mean, that's such a huge question. I mean, it's art reflects life. It has a way of showing us who we are as people and where we are in the world today. There are some things you can't quantify in numbers. The idea that you're seeing people on stage and you're following their lives, and it makes you more empathetic. It makes you able to understand people better. And when you're an empathetic society, you would tend to give more. And we are a very close-knit community. People here, I mean, the reason they call it the volunteer capital of Canada, right, is that people here care about each other and they take care of each other. And so being able to sort of see the world through that lens of art is better than banging an idea over the head. I mean, you can go to a school and yell at kids and say, don't do drugs, right? Or you can show a play about somebody who goes through a bad situation and comes out the other side, and it helps express that idea without it being obvious. And in some ways that's nice, because then you go home later and you go, oh, that was kind of about don't do drugs, without having to say it. Yeah. And so there's a great way of using art and image and metaphor in a way that not even TV and film can do, because theater is a place where the audience gets to do some of the work too. It's not obvious, it's not literal, you know. You go to the theater and you kind of get half the story and then you put the other half together, and I think that's what audiences love about theater. But I can't speak enough as to the value of art. It's what represents society. If you look at history, the three things that are remembered in history are art, politics, and architecture, which arguably is a combination of art and politics. So really the two things that we remember in history. Nobody remembers who was the richest man in 65 BC. What you remember is what was the play that went on that won all the awards. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that, because art defines a society. And it is it's no coincidence that when art is at its highest in a society, those societies are the most dominant societies in the world. And it shows that the ones that support the arts end up growing the most.
Yeah, that makes sense. And actually, speaking of school, I know you guys do have a bit of a focus on youth and PG. How has that changed Theatre Northwest, and what do you think some of those, again, importance of it, especially for youth?
Well, as you said, you know, I mean, I was born in Toronto. I grew up in a community that had a lot of professional art for young people right from a young age. And when I got here, I was quite surprised that there wasn't really any professional art for young people. And they deserve that. And I don't mean Tupi and Beano on ice, you know, or some fun tour of something on ice that comes to the CN Centre. I'm talking about something that can help them express themselves and think and understand the world around them better. And young people are very smart, much smarter than I think we give them credit for. And so we developed a Theatre for Young Audience program, and we bring a tour of a professional theatre show every year. First we did Where the Wild Things Are, and then last year we did Once Upon a Time. This year we're doing Robinson Crusoe on Friday. And each year it's something that the young people can come in and they can enjoy that experience and learn. And I think you can't measure how important that is. I mean, even selfishly, we're just building audiences at a young age, you know, so in 20 years, there are patrons. But also, you know, having a youngster at home myself, it's important to have a space that they can go to and share and be around each other, especially because these kids today are growing up in a highly digitized world where so much of their experiences in life are like this, right? And I'm not saying that's a bad or a good thing. I think, you know, some bad, some good in that world. But to be able to have this relationship, a real human interaction, is still going to be important to them, because at the end of the day, you're still dealing with human beings on a daily basis. And art is so much about learning how to communicate ideas and understanding people in the world. So for them, I think it's immeasurable the kind of growth they can have from the experience of theater. Yeah,
that's great. I also know you guys are not-for-profit. Have you noticed an increase or anything with the amount of people donating or helping out with the theater?
It's a testy thing. I mean, art is never a supremely profitable thing. I mean, you guys are not far in that. You understand what it's like to have to keep the place running on a place that, you know, especially with public access, you know, it's not something that necessarily has all the funding in the world. And there's a lot of people who need that money for other things, you know, the difference between us getting a grant or Aim High getting a grant, right? I mean, how do you argue those two things? They're both absolutely valuable. So we have public funding, we have our ticket sales, we have our fundraisers, we have sponsorships, donors, government grants. It's a lot of work every year to make sure that we're making the money, but also we're able to charge the lowest rates in Canada. I mean, our tickets are $26 to $30. You would never find that anywhere. My parents just said they went to a show in Toronto, it was $240 for a ticket for theater. We could easily charge that, but no one would come. And then we wouldn't have to get public funding, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is, to make it affordable to the community, we have to go to these other areas, but we always are going to need the public to support. This is a community's theater. It's not a community theater, but it's a community's theater. And Prince George has an investment. The city puts money into the theater, so the taxpayers are paying for this particular experience. And it's important for us to try to supply whatever we can for them. But the constant struggle to keep the budgets lined up is never ending. So of course, any way we can have donations and sponsorships are going to help us get through.
Yeah, and of course, it's not even that we're just using actors, like you were saying, in PG. You get actors from all across Canada, right?
Yeah, 99% of our actors are flown in and housed, and that's a real expense that most theaters in big cities don't have to deal with, because we don't have any professional artists in the city. We have me and my wife and the original founder of the organization, and those are the only three professionally accredited artists in Prince George. We still want to give opportunities to the locals, but to keep the quality at the level we want it at, we have to make sure that we're bringing in the artists who can keep it at that level, because that's the point. Is we don't want you to have to fly to Vancouver or Toronto to see a show. We're going to bring that kind of show here, so you can see it right in your own backyard effectively. And so to do that, we have to make sure that we bring the best artists who are working today.
That's awesome. Do you find when you're doing a show that you get like a bit of a community with your artists and the people working on a show?
Oh, people love coming here.
Yeah.
I mean, especially from the big cities. You know, now we have quite a large company for It's a Wonderful Life, and they absolutely love being here because they come mostly from, I have people from Winnipeg, Calgary, Vancouver, Toronto, 6 people from Prince George. It's a large one for this one, which is great. But, you know, for them, the grind of the big city, the pace of the big city is quite intense. And so for them to have the opportunity to come out here, and they all see it as sort of a spa vacation. It's 6 weeks where they can just relax. I mean, they do the work, but once the show's running, they're only working 2 hours a day. And so the rest of the day, they're just walking around the city, and oftentimes are recognized by people who've seen the show, who talk to them, and they go around. I want to take them to Force for the World next week if I can. And so it's really a pleasure for them to come up here and be here. And I've rarely found any of them have any major complaints about the experience. They love coming up here.
That's great. And do you want to touch up on the show that either, depending on whether you're watching this now or a bit later, It's a Wonderful Life?
Yeah, It's a Wonderful Life, the radio play. It's an adaptation of the original movie. It was made in 2005, 6, 7 in that area. And it puts you in a live 1940s radio station where 14 actors are playing 63 parts. You have a live Foley score person, so somebody's making all the sound effects. You know, we have a wind machine, and it's crazy. We have one thing, I should have brought a few of those things with me, but one of the things that's fantastic is the cash register, the way it was invented. It's basically an old coffee tin box with a school bell on it and then a bunch of keys in it. And when you shake it, it goes shing. It's unbelievable. And it's trying to invent these things from scratch. How do you make a train? Well, it's a Kraft dinner box. You know, I mean, it's unbelievable, the sound effects as they're created. And so people are really loving it because it is a story about an unextraordinary man just trying to take care of his family in a small town, and life is tough. And at the end, the community rallies around and saves him, you know? And so there's this beautiful beauty about this story of this man that I think the audiences are connecting with. And we're selling out shows, which is fantastic. And people are surprised at how quickly they're immersed in the story. You know, at first you don't really know. And the magic of it a little bit too is, as it starts as a radio play with everybody with scripts in hand and talking, over time the actors start to turn into the characters, and it slowly just becomes the play.
Oh, that's
you know,
cool.
And so it's really kind of fun to watch this kind of point where they're not really doing the radio thing anymore. It's kind of like they're becoming that story, and I think people have adored it. It's been a real a bit of a tearjerker at times, but tears of enjoyment, you know, not like, oh, bring you down. Kind of the way Jake Skiff felt. And, you know, this show has been hitting so hard that, you know, people used to say Buddy was their favorite show at the theater. Now people are saying this was their favorite show. And going into our 25th anniversary next season, it's nice to be hitting all the shows that audiences are loving right now. So, I mean, if you get a chance to come out, if you are watching this before December 13th, I think it's not one you want to miss because everybody's talking about it, and it's just a great, exciting, entertaining, and inspiring show.
Yeah, it sounds great. And what other shows do you have lined up for the rest of the season?
Well, what's next after this is an adaptation that I've created. It's called Hedda Noir, and it's based on a play called Hedda Gabler, which is a classic play about a woman in this sort of world, and she doesn't really have any control, so she starts setting off all these things to sort of destroy the whole world around her. And we're doing it in this kind of film noir style. And for those who don't know, you know, film noir is this sort of 1940s, not sort of, it is a 1940s film style that sort of originated with some of the French and German directors who during the war came to the US, and also during the war was sort of this downtime, so this idea that criminals were kind of cool, and you know, and there's this idea of a femme fatale, this woman who sort of is in control of things and then loses control and everything kind of goes mad. And so we're kind of giving it that lens, you know, with all that cool lighting and the costumes, and it's fantastic. I mean, I've readapted and written it in a way that it's kind of just this exciting detective story story about, sort of who done it, how, it's not really even a who done it, it's how done it. How did it all happen? We start with this gunshot, right? And who got shot? What happened? And we kind of walk through this whole story. And so that one's going to be just a cool show that's in February and March. And then in April, we're doing a comedy called The Best Brothers. It's about two brothers who recently lost their mother because a cross-dresser named Pina Colada fell off, a drag queen named Pina Colada fell off a pride float during the pride parade and killed her. And so the brothers have come back to bury their mother, and they couldn't be more different, and they don't know how to do any of this, and it's just absolutely drop dead hysterical. And it's a partnership with Western Canada Theatre and Kamloops, and so they did it at the beginning of the year, we're doing it at the end of the year. And then it's actually now going to Vancouver after that, so it's getting this continued life. But a hysterical, funny comedy just to end the season on a nice note. And then we have our presentation series where we're bringing the Robinson Crusoe on Friday and doing a reading of a new play we've developed here called Painting the Streets, about living in Prince George. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So something that people might be interested in, because hopefully one day that play will be on our stage. And how exciting would it be to have a professional debut of a show about Prince George here at the theatre?
Yeah, that sounds like a great season.
Yeah, it's fun. Awesome. I think we're really excited going into our 25th anniversary. I think the audiences are getting excited. So
I was wondering if you wanted to talk a bit about how the local scene in the theatre has kind of been increasing.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's been growing even since I've arrived. There are a lot of little local groups. There are a couple at the university. There's Pocket Theatre and Judy Russell, and a number of other little companies that are popping up, the Miracle Project, things like that. And so the world is expanding here, which is great, and I mean that's a hope for us. It's not that we want to bring people from outside the city. It's that we don't have the professional angle as we talked about. But if we can grow, if we can train and create local artists, which we have in terms of our technicians. All of our technicians and technical staff are local. Our designers, we've started to build some designers we have local. We're building like they're blocks of something. We're building stage management crew, and that stage managers are the people who run the whole show when the director's gone, and they sit in the booth, they call all the lights. They're super important, probably the most important people in the entire theater production. And so we have somebody local now that we've been grooming to take over as our stage manager. And what we're hoping down the road is perhaps to begin a school in some way and begin a training program. Right now, an artist in town who works with a company called Shooting Stars, she does sort of a summer camp at our theater, and we did a sewing camp last year, which was hugely successful, to teach them costuming, and we're hoping that not this coming summer, but the following summer, we'll merge with that Shooting Stars and create an entire summer camp, production camp. So we have people doing carpentry, we have people doing lights and sound, directing, acting, and at the end, it all comes together. And we put on a show with all of these elements, and hopefully over time, some of these people who perhaps will stay local or maybe will go and get training and come back, we'll be able to pull from them. And I mean, it would be wonderful if, like most of the large city centers, we had people locally we could turn to perform in the shows. The difficulty is, if you're a professional artist, it's hard to survive on one theater. And so as these other little companies grow, maybe there will be people who say, okay, well, there's enough of a scene that I can stick around, and then we will grow that community. But you see it happening all the time, but you want to make sure that these people are willing to give of their lives. The difference between somebody who's at Theatre Northwest or somebody who's in Judy Russell's show is Judy Russell hires people who have professional jobs, they have professional lives. Some of them are doctors, lawyers, dentists. People we hire, they don't have other jobs, they don't have other careers, they are actors, and they suffer hard for their art, and they work hard to be technically very strong. And so it's incomparable, the comparisons. You can't compare between an amateur and a professional. It's like anything else. So the idea of being able to take some of those artists that are starting to grow in the amateur world and make them professional, or help them get to that professional level so they can work with us regularly, that's huge. And we have it all behind the scenes. It's just on stage, it's harder to find those people. But we're starting to see more and more of them.
Yeah, very cool. And going back to talking about how you're picking the shows, what would you say makes like a show good? Why would you pick one for Theatre Northwest over another?
It's taken years for me to figure that out. I don't know if I've totally figured that out yet, because the audiences are changing all the time. The demographics are such that sort of the 75 to 90 group that used to be the most dominant theatre goers are passing on. They're either snowbirding or moving away or literally passing away. And so what's that next generation? The boomers, right? But the boomers don't really go to theater that much. They like their Netflix and they like to go on vacations. And so what we see, and this is kind of globally we're seeing, is theaters are seeing 25 to 45, and then they're seeing 70 to 90. 90, but where's that 45 to 70, right? And we don't know. And it's a tough question, and trying to engage with them as to what their interests are is difficult when they're not there. So I think, you have to just be in conversation with your audiences. You have to take them on the journey they're going. But again, as I mentioned before, knowing that that journey is constantly moving. And so the perfect show for this audience, I think they like nostalgia. I think they like sentimentality. I think they like humor. I think those are obvious hits for them, and which is where It's a Wonderful Life fits into all of those boxes. But the idea of doing It's a Wonderful Life not as a normal play, but as a radio station, is a bit innovative, actually. So if you can give them a little bit of the innovation with some of the other stuff, something that they still can relate to and enjoy, I think you found that nice balance. It's a Wonderful Life has been, maybe since I've arrived, the first one I perceive as a real hit since I've been here, that seems like everybody loves it. You don't get that often. And that's normal everywhere. I mean, you put on a million plays, and how many movies have you seen that you think are brilliant, right? You've seen thousands of movies, but maybe you can name on one or two hands the ones that are actually profoundly inspiring, right? And so you do your best, and you continue to do a play, see how the audience responds. Sometimes people will love some things that other people hate, and we talked about that. But really, when it comes to this audience, I think it is about sentimentality, it is about humor, and it is about nostalgia. You hit those three pretty well, and you'll be all right. The danger is that some of those things can be very superficial. And that's my problem, is I don't like superficiality. The argument being that people say, well, my life is hard enough. When I go to the theater, I just want to escape. I don't want to think, But it's actually the opposite. It's not that your life is hard. It's that your life is mundane. Your life is the same. It's you going to the office, sitting for 8 hours a day, staring at a screen, and your brain is fried. And at the end of it, you say, God, I got to go to the gym, and I got to stretch. Well, theater's the gym for the brain. And that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to help you shake up that kind of monotony. So it's not about it being more difficult. It's that it actually helps make your brain alive, and that's what's exciting about theater, is that you can walk out of there inspired and excited and go to the next day a little happier, actually, even if it isn't a show that you love, because at least you've shared in that experience. And so, finding that balance and helping audiences move closer towards shows that engage their attention versus shut it down, is sort of the goal. And so balancing those two worlds of giving the audience what they want and also giving them what they need is a very complicated tightrope to walk. And I don't know if I think I'd get a lot more phone calls and emails if I had the answer to what makes the perfect play for an audience. You never know.
And do you want to say anything else? Do you think we missed on anything, or?
No, not at all. I just think that people, you got to come out and check out the shows. It's one of those things that sometimes a place can be taken for granted, and people will think, well, it's always going to be there, but without the support of this community, we won't be there. And it's really important that people come out and see the shows, and that theater isn't always about liking or disliking the show. You don't have to like or dislike it. It's experiencing that. It's just coming in and being there and being alive in a moment and celebrating what the world looks like today. And you can walk out and hate the show, but if you're talking about it, then great. It had an impact on you, and that's a good thing. The worst thing I could ever hope for is an audience going to a show and come out going, and having no experience. I'd rather you either loved it or hated it, but at least you had some sort of experience with it. And I think that the only way you can have that is by coming to the theater.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and
Thank
talking
you,
to us.
Thank you.
That's the show. Thanks so much to Jack Grinhaus. If you want to let us know who you want to see next, contact us at facebook.com/pgupclose. Till next time, I'm Laura Smith.